Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into some really interesting source material all about the U.S. Enrolled Agent Exam, the EA exam.
That's right.
So, if you've been kicking around the idea of getting into tax, maybe you're totally new to this whole world, or perhaps you're looking for a professional credential that's flexible but, well respected, this deep dive is definitely for you.
hmm Yeah, the material we've got here was shared by a listener, actually, someone thinking about taking that plunge into the EA exam. It gives a good look at the prospects, the benefits, and really a focused strategy for studying on your own.
And here's the part that really grabbed me. It shines a light on using tools that are, well, pretty much everywhere and cheap or even free. We're talking common AI assistants as like core parts of how you'd study.
Right.
I mean, the big question is if you didn't do an accounting degree, maybe no tax background at all, can you actually tackle this thing using, say, ChatGPT and similar tools?
And that's exactly the core question this material tries to help us figure out. Can someone, new to the field, maybe without that traditional tax or accounting background, realistically pass the EA exam using these accessible AI tools and online platforms?
So, okay, our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to unpack the key insights from this stuff, break down the study strategy it suggests, and figure out what it means for you, the listener. Is self-studying the EA with AI feasible, especially if you're starting from square one? Let's get into it.
Okay, so first things first, let's lay the groundwork. What exactly is the EA exam and who's it really aimed at?
Good place to start.
Well, it's a professional credential, right? It's issued by the IRS, the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. If you pass this exam, it basically certifies you to represent taxpayers directly before the IRS. That means handling things like audits, collection issues, appeals.
So you become a federally authorized tax practitioner. That sounds like a pretty significant credential to have in the tax world.
It absolutely is. It's
Yeah.
highly regarded. The exam itself, it's broken down into three separate parts.
Right.
Part one, that deals with individual taxation, so personal tax
Yeah.
returns, that kind of thing. Part two gets into business taxation, like corporations, partnerships,
Right.
LLCs, the whole gamut.
Right.
And then part three is all about representation, practice, and procedure. So that covers the rules tax pros have to follow, like Circular 230 and how you actually interact with the IRS.
Three distinct chunks to get through. Now, you mentioned who it's for, but there's a really important point in this material for anyone new listening, right? About who can even take the best.
Oh, absolutely critical. Yeah, the material makes a really big point of this.
Yeah.
The EAA exam has no specific educational prerequisites, none. You don't need a degree in accounting. You don't need work experience, not to just sit for the exam anyway. Basically, if you can read English, you can take it.
Wow. That's that's incredibly open, isn't it? It really lowers the barrier to entry, makes this professional path seem much more achievable for a whole range of people, maybe looking for a career change or just adding a skill, regardless of what they studied before.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone can take it, does the material suggest that anyone can actually, pass it, even coming in cold with zero tax knowledge?
It really does lean that way. The reading is pretty optimistic, suggesting that, yeah, with the right approach to studying, even folks with no prior tax background can absolutely pass.
Really?
Yeah, it even mentions examples, people starting completely fresh, passing all three parts relatively fast. There's one specific mention of someone from Korea who apparently passed all three parts in just 3 or 4 months of really focused study.
3 or 4 months. From scratch. Wow. Okay, that's a pretty powerful story if you're maybe feeling a bit intimidated because you don't have that official background.
Exactly. So the source material is basically saying, look, focused effort and the right method can make up for not having that formal education in tax.
Which kind of leads us to the how, right? If self-study is possible for newcomers.
Right, because traditionally, self-study often meant shelling out for pretty expensive review courses and books.
Exactly. So, what does this material say about using these more accessible, maybe AI-powered tools instead?
Okay, this is where we get into the AI toolkit itself. The material really zeroes in on using three main tools, mostly free or very low cost, things you can easily find online. We're talking ChatGPT, Khan Academy, and Quizlet.
Okay, the big names.
Yeah, and the basic idea is that these tools, if you use them smartly, could potentially be your main study resources, maybe replacing, or at least heavily supplementing, those traditional expensive options.
Right, let's start with the one everyone's talking about, ChatGPT. How does the reading suggest you use an AI chatbot like that for prepping for the EA exam?
ChatGPT is kind of positioned as your potential AI tutor, maybe a practice partner too. One of the biggest pluses highlighted is just how good it is for Q&A for getting explanations.
Ah, okay.
So you had a tax concept, maybe something like the earned income credit or the difference between an S corp and a C corp for tax purposes, and it feels really dense.
Mhm.
You can ask ChatGPT to break it down for you.
So not just reading a dry definition, you can actually ask it to explain it in a simpler way.
Exactly. The reading gives those examples. You can literally say, explain this like I'm 5, or ask for real-world examples.
Yeah.
That kind of immediate, tailored explanation can be gold when you're stuck and don't have a human expert handy.
Yeah, I can see that. Getting unstuck quickly would really speed things up.
Hmm?
What else? Does it do more than just explain?
Oh, yeah. Beyond just explanations, the material points out it can generate practice questions for you on specific topics you're working on.
Like multiple choice?
Multiple choice, yeah, or scenario-based questions. Then you can ask it for the model answers and, importantly, the explanations behind those answers. So you get this really tight loop of testing yourself and getting feedback.
Mm.
The material even brings up reports that the underlying tech, GPT-4, has done surprisingly well on professional exams, including accounting and tax stuff. Some reports even suggest it could pass the EA exam with pretty high scores, like average 85% or more.
Okay, whoa, that's a pretty bold claim about its knowledge. But, and this feels like a big, but AI isn't perfect, is it?
Yeah.
What are the major downsides the reading flag?
You nailed it. That's the huge caveat here. The material is very clear. There are significant limitations. The big ones are accuracy. AI can sometimes just make stuff up, those hallucinations, and currency. Tax law changes, right? The EA exam tests the latest rules, and ChatGPT's knowledge isn't always perfectly up to the minute.
So you absolutely cannot just take its word for everything. That could be dangerous.
Definitely. The reading emphasizes that, actual financial professionals warn against blindly trusting AI answers. Verification is just. It's non-negotiable when you're dealing with something as precise as tax law.
Okay, so given those risks, how does the reading suggest you use it effectively but also safely?
The main strategies are always try to verify the information. Go check official IRS materials, reputable tax websites, things like that. And here's a really practical tip from the source. Actually, copy and paste text from an official source, like an IRS publication, say, Pub 17 for individual taxes. Paste that into ChatGPT, and then ask it to summarize or explain that specific text.
Ah, so you're feeding it the known correct info first.
Exactly. That way you're using its processing power on information you already know is accurate and current, rather than relying on its potentially shaky internal knowledge base. The idea is to use it for that quick feedback. Learn something, check your understanding with AI questions, get AI feedback, but always circle back and double-check the AI's answers against a reliable source.
Got it. Use its interactive ability, but keep the official stuff as the final word. Okay, what about Khan Academy? How does that fit in, especially if you're one of those newcomers?
Khan Academy is presented as a really good starting point, especially if you don't have that background in tax or accounting. It's free, it's nonprofit, great educational platform.
But it's not specifically for the EA exam, right?
No, not at all. But it does have content that covers some of the foundational concepts in tax and accounting. The reading mentions a section on taxes and tax forms specifically.
So it's like laying the groundwork, the absolute basics.
Pretty much. Think of it as getting your bearings. What are taxes? What's income? What's the basic difference between a deduction and a credit? Khan Academy uses simple language, visuals. It's a gentler introduction before you dive into the actual dense tax code or IRS publications. The source calls it a preparatory stage for tax law study.
Okay, helpful for orientation, but it wouldn't be enough to pass the exam on its own.
Definitely not. It just doesn't have the depth or the specific detail you need for a professional exam like the EA. It won't cover all the intricate rules and regulations. It's foundational, not comprehensive for this purpose. And, like AI, you need to be mindful that its tax content might not reflect the absolute latest changes instantly.
So the advice is use it to build that solid base layer of understanding first.
That's the idea. If you're feeling shaky on the fundamentals, start there. Get comfortable with the core ideas. Then the material suggests you can blend it with ChatGPT, watch a Khan Academy video, still feel a bit fuzzy, jump over to ChatGPT and ask it clarifying questions right away.
Okay, build the foundation, then use ChatGPT for deeper dives in practice, always checking against official sources. Makes sense. What about tool number 3, Quizlet? How does pure memorization fit in here?
Well, tax law, unfortunately, involves a fair bit of memorization, right? You've got specific terms, form numbers, thresholds, deduction limits, deadlines. Lots of fiddly details.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Quizlet is basically built for that. It's all about efficient memorization using digital flashcards.
And presumably there are already EA-related flashcards on there.
Yes, that's a key point in the reading. Because it's community-based, people have already created and shared flashcard sets specifically for EA exam topics. You can search for things like Enrolled Agent Exam Part 1 and find sets covering definitions, rules, those limits, potentially saving you a lot of time making cards yourself.
That is handy. What else makes it useful? Any special features?
Well, it's not just flipping cards. It has different study modes like Learn, which actively quizzes you, Test Mode, even matching games. And importantly, it tracks what you get wrong, so you can really focus your review on your weak spots. The reading also mentions an AI feature called Q-Chat for interactive quizzes, though it notes that might be changing or ending.
Okay. And the downsides. What are the risks with Quizlet?
Same risk as any community content, really. Accuracy. Those user-created sets might have mistakes, or worse, be outdated. Tax laws change. So verification is key here, too. You've got to check the info against official sources or your primary study materials.
Right. Trust but verify. Always.
Exactly. And the other thing is, Quizlet is mostly about rote memorization. The EA exam tests your understanding and application of the rules, not just whether you can spit back a number. You need to know why that limit applies, not just what it is.
So how do you use it effectively, then, alongside the others?
The advice is to use it strategically for the stuff that does need memorizing. As you learn concepts using, say, ChatGPT and verify the details in IRS Tubs, create your own Quizlet cards for the key facts like medical expense deduction AGI floor, 7.5%, or Form 2555, foreign earned income exclusion. Or use existing sets, but double-check them first, then use the Learn or Test modes.
Okay.
And the materials suggest linking it back. If you keep missing a flashcard on Quizlet, maybe hop over to ChatGPT and ask it to explain the underlying concept behind that fact more deeply. Build understanding, not just recall.
Okay, I think I'm getting the picture. You've got Khan Academy for the absolute basics, ChatGPT for deeper explanation, practice generation, and interacting with official texts, and then Quizlet for drilling the necessary memorization. How does this actually look in practice? Can you walk us through an example study session using these tools, like the reading suggests?
Yeah, absolutely. The material gives a really good concrete example. Let's say you're studying deductions for Part 1, the individual tax part.
Okay, deductions. How would you tackle that?
First, concept learning. You start by asking ChatGPT something like, explain U.S. individual income tax deductions, or what's the difference between the standard deduction and itemized deductions. If the first explanation is still confusing, you ask it, can you explain that more simply? Keep probing until you get the basic idea.
So get the big picture from the AI first.
Right. Then, step 2, deep dive and verification. Critically, don't just rely on the AI's explanation. Go to the official source for deductions. That's probably IRS Publication 17. Read the relevant sections there. And here's that smart trick. Copy key paragraphs or sections from Pub 17, paste them into ChatGPT, and ask it to summarize or pull out the key rules and limits from that specific text you just gave it.
Leveraging the AI to process the reliable source material, that's clever. Avoids the out-of-date info risk.
Exactly. It helps keep things accurate. Okay, step 3, self-assessment. Now that you've read and hopefully understood, ask ChatGPT to test you. Generate 2 multiple-choice questions about the difference between standard and itemized deductions. Answer them. Then get the AI's answers, and crucially, its explanation of why the answer is correct. If you got it wrong, ask the AI to explain why your answer was wrong.
An instant feedback loop. Nice.
Yep. Step 4, memorization. Now, you take those specific deduction limits, rules, maybe related form numbers you just learned and verified, and you create Quizlet flashcards for them. Then use Quizlet study modes, learn, test, to drill those facts into your memory.
Locking down the numbers and details.
Right. And finally, step 5, application. Quizlet tests recall, but you need to apply the rules. So go back to ChatGPT. Ask it for scenario-based questions. Give me a scenario where a taxpayer would be better off itemizing. Or, my client spent 6% of their AGI on medical expenses. Can they deduct any of it? Why or why not? This forces you to actually use the rules you've learned, not just recite them.
Okay, that example really ties it all together. ChatGPT for the initial understanding and varied practice, official sources as the anchor for truth, Quizlet for the pure memorization bits, and then back to ChatGPT to practice applying it all.
Exactly. It creates a sort of dynamic workflow using different tools for different parts of the learning process, concept, detail, application.
All right, so let's hit the big question again. Based on all this, does the material conclude that it's really possible to pass the EA exam mainly using just these kinds of low-cost, accessible tools? What's the final verdict, and what do people who've actually tried this say?
The material's conclusion is pretty direct. It says, passing this way is sufficiently possible. It emphasizes that, look, people pass the EA via self-study all the time, and these AI tools just make that self-study path potentially more efficient and definitely more accessible.
Right.
And it circles back to those reports about GPT-4 doing well on EA-type questions as, supporting evidence that the AI can handle the material to some degree.
Sufficiently possible sounds, well, possible, but maybe not a slam dunk. What are the really crucial tips or warnings that come from learners who've used AI in their prep, according to the reading?
Yeah, there are some very important caveats. A big one highlighted is a warning against, and I'm quoting here, excessive blind faith in AI.
Okay, don't just assume it's always right.
Exactly. One learner mentioned in the source said something like, AI is great for quick answers, but it might not always be as accurate as a human expert or a verified textbook. They stress that those aha moments, where you really get it, they come from your own consistent practice and effort, not just having the AI feed you information.
That feels really important. The AI is a tool, a helper, but you are the one who ultimately has to understand and verify it.
Precisely. You're responsible for your own learning. Another huge point is time and plan management. Self-study demands discipline, right? These AI tools are there 24/7, which is great, but they won't make a study schedule for you. They won't set goals. You have to provide that structure yourself.
The human element is still key: motivation, planning.
Absolutely. And then there's the crucial issue of current information. We keep hitting this, but it's vital. The EA exam tests the current tax year's laws. So always specify the tax year when you ask AI questions, like explain the 2024 rules for X. But even better, as we discussed, is find the current rule in an official IRS source first. Then use the AI to help you understand that specific document.
Right. Feed it the known truth.
And double-check any Quizlet sets, too. Make sure they're for the right year.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, the material touches on mental health. Self-studying can be lonely. It suggests checking out online communities. Reddit forums like OrTax Pros or Runrolled Agent are mentioned to connect with others. And interestingly, it notes that just interacting with the AI, asking it questions, can sometimes make studying feel a bit less solitary, almost like having a study buddy, albeit a digital one.
A tireless, non-judgmental study buddy. I can see that. Sort of. And finally, practice, practice, practice. Get familiar with practice exam types. The EA uses a question bank, so seeing different formats helps. Ask the AI to generate various question styles. And then simulation. You absolutely need to take full-length practice tests under timed conditions. Whether you generate them with AI, use free samples from sites the source mentions like iPrep, or find other resources, build that exam stamina.
Okay, so the overall takeaway seems to be, yes, it's definitely possible, maybe even more accessible now thanks to these tools, especially if you're new, but it's not magic. It requires your active work, your discipline, and constant careful verification.
That sums it up perfectly. The AI is a powerful adjunct, a helper, an assistant, but your own effort, your own understanding, your own checking, that's what drives success. The reading is really clear on this. There is no trick or shortcut that can replace sufficient preparation.
A very grounded message. Okay, so how does this AI toolkit apply differently across the three parts of the exam? Does the reading suggest specific strategies for Part 1 versus Part 2 or 3? It does offer some brief pointers for each part. For Part 1 individuals, the topics might feel a bit more familiar, dealing with personal taxes. The suggestion is use Khan Academy, maybe for the very basics, like how a Form 1040 is structured. Then rely heavily on ChatGPT for explaining the details of specific rules deductions, credits, filing statuses, and generating lots of practice questions and scenarios. Quizlet is key here for all those individual tax limits, phase-outs, and form numbers.
So, relatable topics, but lots of specific details to nail down.
Exactly. For Part 2, businesses, things generally get more complex. You're dealing with different entity types, partnerships, S-Corp, C-Corp. So maybe start with basics on business structures, perhaps from Khan Academy or similar resources. But ChatGPT becomes really valuable here for explaining tricky calculations like depreciation or S-Corp basis calculations, which are super important.
Basis, right, the owner's investment track.
Yeah, that's crucial. And explaining detailed regulations like NOLs, net operating losses, or Section 179 expensing. Use ChatGPT to generate calculation problems and complex business scenarios. Quizlet is good for deadlines, business-specific form numbers like the 941 for payroll, and limits like the Section 179 amount.
Okay, Part 2 sounds like more complex rules and calculations.
Generally, yes.
All right.
Then Part 3, representation, practice, and procedure. This part is less about calculation and more about rules, ethics and procedures. Think Circular 230, the ethical Bible for taxpayer rights, how audits work.
Okay.
So start with ChatGPT for an overview of Circular 230 or the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Use the AI, again, to summarize or explain dense official documents. But critically, the material emphasizes using ChatGPT to create scenario-based ethical and procedural questions, like an EA discovers their client lied on a past return. What should the EA do according to Circular 230? That kind of thing is very common in Part 3. Quizlet helps with definitions and key forms like Form 2848, the power of attorney.
So for part 3, ChatGPT is really useful for wrestling with those situational judgment questions based on the official rules.
Exactly. It's about using the right tool for the specific challenge of each part. So wrapping it all up, the source material really makes a strong case that these common accessible tools, ChatGPT, Khan Academy, Quizlet, they make self-studying for the EA exam, well, sufficiently possible. They offer a powerful, low-cost way to tackle it.
Right. ChatGPT is your interactive tutor and question bank.
Khan Academy for building that initial foundation if you need it.
And Quizlet for drilling down on the memorization.
Exactly. And the low cost and 247 availability, that's huge for self-studiers, especially as the material notes, if you're trying to fit studying around a job or other commitments.
It really does empower the individual learner, doesn't it?
It does, but throughout these are aids, they're assistants. They don't replace your effort, your critical thinking, your verification. You have to actively engage, manage your time, and really build that understanding yourself. Avoid that excessive blind faith in AI.
It's about being a smart learner, using the tool strategically, but knowing the real learning happens in your head as you wrestle with it all.
That's the core message. And the material ends on a positive note, mentioning learners felt these tools, especially the interactive AI, made the solitary journey of self-study feel a bit less lonely, almost like having a study partner, and offered much-needed flexibility. So here's something to chew on as we finish. This material clearly shows how tools like AI are making complex professional knowledge, like U.S. tax law, much more accessible. As these digital partners get even smarter and more integrated into how we learn and work, maybe the most crucial skill for professionals in the future isn't just knowing all the information, but mastering how to effectively question, guide, verify, and ultimately apply the knowledge we get from them.
That's a really interesting thought for the future. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into using AI for EA exam self-study. We really hope this discussion has given you some valuable insights and maybe some confidence for your own learning journey.